Gorilla Mom Screams at Zookeeper Daily. The shocking truth behind it will break your heart. The afternoon sun cast long, fractured shadows across the damp, moss-lined concrete of the primate sanctuary, catching the shimmering dust motes suspended in the heavy, humid promise of impending rain. The atmosphere was thick, pressing down with the pungent scent of crushed eucalyptus and the sharp, metallic tang of raw, unadulterated fear. Kala, a majestic 300-pound western lowland gorilla with fur the color of midnight and charcoal, hurled her massive frame against the reinforced steel mesh of her enclosure. Her powerful hands, rough and calloused like weathered stones, gripped the wire so tightly her knuckles paled beneath her dark skin. She threw her head back, exposing her teeth, and unleashed a scream so guttural and deeply agonizing that it vibrated against the rib cages of anyone standing within 50 feet. This wasn't the territorial chest beating of a wild animal. This was the piercing, acidic sound of absolute heartbreak. And the target of her relentless daily fury was the one man she had loved since she was an infant herself, head zookeeper David. Every time David's heavy, rubber-soled boots crunched against the gravel path leading to her habitat, the screaming would begin, echoing through the canopy and sending flocks of wild birds scattering into the bruised purple sky. He would stand there, his hands trembling slightly, the scent of damp earth rising around him, completely shattered by the sudden, violent rejection from the creature he considered family. As we prepare to dive into the depths of this incredible, heart-wrenching mystery that left top animal behaviorists completely baffled, I want to invite you into our community. If stories of the profound, unseen bonds between humans and animals touch your soul, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We are building a sanctuary of empathy here, and we would absolutely love to know where in this beautiful world you are joining us from right now. Drop a comment below with your city, your country, and the exact time you are watching this, as we connect across time zones through the universal language of the heart. To truly understand the devastating weight of Kala's sudden hostility, one must step back into the golden-hued memories of their shared past, where the air was always perfumed with the sweet, starchy scent of the ripe yams David would bring her every morning. For over a decade, their bond was the quiet, steady heartbeat of the sanctuary. When Kala was just a traumatized orphan, shivering in the sterile, fluorescent-lit quarantine room of her youth, it was David who sat with her through the long, freezing nights. He had wrapped her in thick fleece blankets that smelled of mild detergent and his own comforting scent of cedarwood and old cotton. She had learned the world was safe by tracing the intricate, warm lifelines on the palm of his hand with her tiny, leathery fingers. As she grew into a formidable adult, that trust only deepened. Their mornings were defined by a profound, silent communion. The pale amber light of dawn would filter through the thick canopy of weeping figs, casting a warm glow over her enclosure as David leaned against the glass, and Kala would press her broad, warm forehead against the barrier, matching her breathing to his. You could feel the deep, resonant peace in those moments, a physical texture in the air as soft as velvet. But that serenity was now utterly gone, replaced by a jagged, suffocating tension that smelled faintly of sour adrenaline and rotting fruit left untouched in her feeding trough. The terrifying shift in their reality began precisely 3 weeks after Kala gave birth to her first infant, a tiny, fragile bundle of sunset-colored fur named Kivu. The jungle enclosure, normally a place of vibrant, rustling foliage and the comforting, earthy aroma of wet bark, had become a fortress of anxiety. At first, Kala was the picture of maternal perfection, cradling Kivu against her chest with a gentleness that brought tears to the eyes of observing staff. But slowly, an invisible shadow crept over the habitat. Kivu's clinical signs began to mysteriously worsen. His normally bright, observant eyes grew dull and glazed, reflecting the harsh, unforgiving glare of the midday sun. The once vigorous infant grew deeply lethargic, his grip on his mother's thick fur loosening day by day until his little hands hung limply at his sides. The sanctuary's experts were spiraling into desperation. They paced the observation decks, their clipboards smelling faintly of ink and sterile paper, whispering in panicked, hushed tones. They assumed Kala was suffering from an aggressive form of primate postpartum psychosis. They believed her daily screams at David were territorial outbursts, a dangerous mother defending her fading infant from the very hands that wanted to help. The air grew brittle with the cold, sterile panic of helplessness. Every time David approached the mesh to get a better look at the deteriorating infant, Kala would charge, screaming that agonizing, chest-tearing cry, her breath pluming in the crisp morning air. The sanctuary directors were hours away from making the devastating decision to tranquilize Kala and forcefully remove Kivu, a traumatic, terrifying separation that would permanently shatter the gorilla's spirit and break David's heart. But David, his heart heavy with the impending doom, couldn't accept the clinical, cold narrative of the experts. On what was supposed to be the final morning before the dreaded separation, he walked down to the enclosure alone. The sky above was a heavy, bruised gray, and the oppressive humidity clung to his skin like a wet shroud. He stood just inches from the reinforced mesh, ignoring the sanctuary protocols, and let Kala scream at him. He closed his eyes, inhaling the sharp, musky scent of her distress, and listened, truly listened, to the language of her heart. When he opened his eyes, he stopped looking at her bared teeth and focused entirely on her body language. The revelation struck him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him breathless in the damp, heavy air. Kala wasn't positioning herself between David and Kivu to block him. She was thrusting the limp, fading infant directly toward the mesh, pressing the baby's face against the small, circular feeding port. And her screams, they weren't accompanied by the rigid, stiff-legged posture of a gorilla preparing to attack. Her knees were bent, her shoulders were hunched in submissive desperation, and her free hand was furiously tapping her own chest right over her mammary glands. The crushing, unspoken truth washed over David in a tidal wave of realization. Kala wasn't experiencing psychosis, she was experiencing the ultimate maternal nightmare. She wasn't producing milk. Her baby was slowly starving in her arms, and she knew it. The agonizing screams directed at David were not threats, they were desperate, begging pleas. She remembered the bottles of warm milk he had fed her a decade ago. She was screaming for him to save her baby because she physically couldn't. The acidic scent of pain that had filled the enclosure wasn't anger. It was the smell of a mother's absolute, terrifying helplessness. Tears, hot and fast, spilled over David's weathered cheeks, mingling with the fine mist of rain now beginning to fall. He turned and sprinted back to the commissary, the gravel crunching violently beneath his boots. When he returned minutes later, he carried a specialized infant primate bottle filled with warm, rich formula. The sweet, creamy aroma of the milk pierced the damp, earthy air of the enclosure, drifting through the steel mesh like a scent of pure salvation. As he approached the barrier, a profound miracle occurred. Kala didn't scream. She dropped to her knees on the wet concrete, letting out a low, trembling rumble of profound relief that vibrated through the very soles of David's feet. With agonizing care, she lifted little Kivu, pressing his small, weakened mouth against the steel feeding port. David's trembling hands guided the rubber nipple through the opening. The moment Kivu latched on, the entire atmosphere of the sanctuary shifted. The sharp, metallic tension shattered, replaced by a soft, overwhelming warmth. Kala pressed her massive face against the mesh, her dark eyes locked intensely onto David's. They stayed like that for 20 minutes in the gentle rain, bridging the gap between species. David could feel the rough, damp texture of her knuckles as she reached through a larger gap to lightly wrap her fingers around his wrist, grounding him, silently thanking him. As the baby drank, regaining his strength with every desperate swallow, Kala and David fell into a rhythm of synchronized breathing. In and out. In and out. The heavy, suffocating dread evaporated into the misty air, leaving only the pure, radiant energy of a crisis averted and a deeply scarred bond miraculously reaffirmed. This incredible, breathless moment in the rain forces us to profoundly re-examine everything we think we know about the natural world. It strips away the clinical arrogance of human observation and demands that we acknowledge the immense, complex emotional landscapes of the animals we share this fragile earth with. Kala's story isn't just a tale of animal survival, it is a stunning testament to the sheer, undeniable intelligence of maternal love. She possessed a sixth sense that transcended mere biological instinct, an ability to bridge the vast evolutionary chasm between primate and human to communicate a nuanced, terrifying reality. She held on to the memory of David's kindness from her own infancy and extrapolated it into a desperate, calculated hope for her child. It teaches us that empathy is not a uniquely human trait, but a universal frequency, a language spoken by the soul that requires no words, only the willingness to truly listen without prejudice. When we strip away our preconceptions and tune into the subtle vibrations of trust, we discover that the animals we seek to protect are often trying desperately to guide us, if only we have the humility to let them show us the way. As little Kivu grows stronger today, safely nourished by a unique daily partnership between a devoted human zookeeper and a deeply intuitive gorilla mother, their story continues to resonate as a beautiful reminder of the miracles that happen when we lead with compassion rather than fear. The darkness of a misunderstood scream was transformed entirely into the warm, life-giving light of connection. If this emotional journey has touched your heart and reminded you of the profound intelligence of the animal kingdom, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear a beautiful story of hope today, and subscribe to our channel to ensure you never miss a moment of the incredible narratives we uncover. But before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where an animal tried to communicate with you in a way that completely defied logic and relied entirely on an unspoken intuition?